All right, awesome. So as we're starting out our question bot, what we're going to be doing is we're actually going to build a question bot app. Some of the work is already going to be done for us because it's just kind of introducing us to this topic, but we'll be building the brains of this question bot. So we're going to make an app that responds differently to different types of questions, just like we just saw in that little demo I did there on the Power School website with its little Power School bot, right? Some of the things that we're going to learn about, we're going to put some of that Boolean and conditionals practice into play today and actually use that in our coding to help our question bot decide based on the question that it's asked, maybe how it should respond. And we might actually honestly see the same thing happen as happened there with the PowerBot initially, where it might not know how to respond, either based on we're asking a question that it doesn't have data for, or the way we're phrasing the question isn't the programmer has built in some answer responses for it. So that's where I had to, in the second case, rephrase my question a different way. And then I did get pointed in the direction of the help community, right? So we'll be kind of working through that in our question bot as well. Some of the new concepts that might pop up are case and default. So default is kind of like the default or base value in our conditionals. So if we have an if statement and an else statement, or maybe we even have an else if statement. If our if statement is not true and we move on to else if, and that's not true, our default value is going to be that last test or that last condition. So that code is what's going to be run. All right. If we think all the way back to photo frame where we built that from scratch, in this case, our app is going to have some functionality already built in for us. Just as a team of app developers might have different teams working on different things or different people working on different things. So the app design we're going to see has been done for us, but we'll end up customizing that a little bit at the end. And some of the other programming has been done for us, and we're going to focus just kind of on the brains of the QuestionBot app, which will be how does that QuestionBot app decide what sort of response to give based on the question? And we'll provide some of that, some of those different responses as we write out our function. All right. So let's go ahead and keep moving here in Schoology and let's get our app downloaded, since I said that we're going to have some of this already written for us. So rather than just going to Xcode, let's scroll down here to the bottom, and I want to really call attention to this red text on the screen here that is letting us know, and I don't think we've ever talked about this before, but after we've opened up an Xcode project file, we don't usually want to move that file while we're running it, because if we do, we're probably going to have our Xcode file or project crash on us because it won't be able to find where that project file is. So we're going to download this QuestionBot zip file here, and we're going to move it before we start running it. All right, so let's just avoid errors by making sure we do it in that order. So I'm going to download that. It should go to your downloads folder. If you are, again, using Safari, then it's going to unzip for you in your downloads folder. If you are using Chrome, then it's going to leave it there as a zipped file. You're going to double click on the zipped file to unzip it. And then you're going to take this folder and you're going to move it to your documents folder where you have all of your Xcode project files. So you can either open two windows and drag it over, or if you want to drag it on top of documents and then into your Xcode projects folder, that is fine as well. But let's get it moved to your project folder before we open the folder and click on anything else because we do not want our app to crash, right? So then we can open our folder and we're going to go here to the project file. So we'll just kind of ignore this other folder for the time being that has some of the other files in it. And we'll double click on this QuestionBot Xcode proj file. And you'll see that familiar kind of warning. It is okay to trust and open this file since we're getting it from our Schoology course. And that's going to be bringing up Xcode and this kind of normal looking Xcode project file, except we notice, depending on how yours is opening up, if you're here on the main storyboard, you see, as I mentioned, the design work of the app has already been done for us. So that other team that I mentioned has done your design work. We'll come back later and customize this a little bit after we get our app, after we get our app running. All right. So again, throw it in the chat if you're having any difficulty there. Just make sure you've moved your QuestionBot folder into your Xcode projects folder and documents before you start up Xcode and double click on it. Otherwise, things will crash on you very quickly. All right, let's go ahead and build and run this. Since we see the design work's kind of done here in the main storyboard, let's see what this app does already. We know we're going to build the brains for the app, but let's check out what it can do yet. And your simulator should be coming up. First time that you run it, it's always a little slower. Mine's up there on the screen. So we can see we have our simulator, our app is running here. We just pretty similar to that PowerBot app that we did the demo with on the website. We see we've got a little robot up here at the top. It says, "Hello, human. I'm QuestionBot. Ask me a question." All right, and we've got a question box that says type your answer, and then our ask button looks grayed out to me at this point. And I think once we type something in here, that will work for us. If you're not seeing your keyboard showing up on your screen, you just may need to activate that. And to activate it, if you push Command K, that will bring your keyboard up. So if you're not seeing a keyboard in your app, use your Command key with a keyboard of your laptop, and that's going to bring this little keyboard up here in your app. All right, so let's go ahead and type a question. You can think of a question. I'm going to think of a question. Let's type that in here using the keyboard that is showing in the simulator screen. So maybe I'll just ask, where are you located? All right. And now we can see that our ask key is active. So go ahead and tap on that in the simulator and see what happens. Did anybody get a good answer to that, your question? I didn't. I got a question mark, and I believe you're going to see that as well. Right? Because right now we haven't built the brains of our question bot yet, so it doesn't know how to answer this question. We can just verify this by asking another question. So go ahead and tap in your question box again and type in another question. And again, you can type it in on your keyboard, or we could also use Command K to bring up our keyboard here in the app itself. I'm going to go ahead and do it that way. I'll say, what is the temperature? Oops, what is the temperature? We're having such nice weather today. And then I'll tap on the ask button, and oops, again, Not a great answer, not a great response. I'm getting the question mark back again. So this QuestionBot app definitely does not have any programming or any brains built into it yet to know how it should be responding to us here in terms of the questions that we're asking, right? I hope you were asking some questions as well, and yours might have been really different than mine. So I kind of asked a couple different types of questions, and QuestionBot didn't know how to respond to either of those. So I'm getting a question mark for both of them. All right. And that's not really great, right? So let's go back over to our code here. Let's go back to our Xcode project and let's fix this up a little bit. So let's go ahead and stop our simulator since our project doesn't really know how to work at this point. And we can take a peek over here at View Controller. I know that's where we usually spend most of our time while we're in Xcode. As I mentioned, this is kind of an example of how different teams or different people on a team might work on different parts of the app. If you're looking in View Controller and you're like, wow, there's already a lot of code here. That's right. There's code already built into this app for you or into this project file to be able to do some work. But our work is going to be here in this section over here called Question Answerer. And if we tap over there, we know this is going to be a Swift file because we see the little Swift icon out in front of that. And if we go ahead and tap there, oh, here's our problem. There's very little code here, right? And you might be seeing kind of an error message down there, again, because our simulator didn't know how to respond to our question. We can just close the console up. We don't need to worry about that error message down there. But as we kind of take a look at our part of this project, this question answerer section, we can see we've got a function here, and this function is called response to, and then we've got a parameter. So we're going to pass in some data into this parameter for the function, and what we're passing in is going to be a question, just as you saw there as we were trying out the QuestionBot app in the simulator. We all were entering some questions. Hopefully you were doing that in your simulator too. And we see type annotation here. So we know based on this colon and the word string is our type that we need to pass in as our question. So we're probably going to type a phrase or a sentence, at least a word, right, in order to formulate some kind of question. And that's why we have string here as the type of data that question is going to be holding for us. Here we see that arrow symbol that we've just been learning about. And again, we know now from the warm-up today and from our work on Tuesday, that means return. So we're going to pass in a question to this function, and this function is going to return a string back to us. Then we can see here in the body of this function where normally we would have something happening that there's nothing there. There's a comment, right? And we know comments don't process any data. So we've got a little to do here telling us we need to write a response, or as we'll find out, a few different responses for QuestionBot to be able to respond back to those questions, just like that PowerBot was trying to respond to my questions earlier, right? Also in the body of this function, we have that return statement because we saw the arrow here, and we know that this function is going to take in a value, which is going to be a string. In our case, it'll be a question, and it's going to return a string. So we need this return statement. And we were all getting a question mark because that's the string that we have here in the code. So instead of having an answer or something that's rephrasing or asking us to rephrase the question, we have a question mark in here. So all that our app knows how to do right now is respond back to every question that's asked with a question mark. Okay, so let's start out by changing this up. So put your cursor in here and highlight that question mark inside of your quotation marks. And we're going to change this string to maybe start out with something similar to what we saw that PowerBot responding to my first question when it didn't know exactly what I was asking, right? So let's have our bot say, I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. All right. So you're replacing the question mark and we're giving it one response. So right now, from our code, we know that once we type in a question in our app, it's going to return a string. And in this case, our return statement says it's going to respond, I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. If you're getting any sort of error message, make sure that you didn't accidentally highlight one of the quotation marks and accidentally delete that. Again, we're returning a string, so we need those quotation marks so that Xcode knows how to handle that phrase or sentence that we're typing. All right, let's build this and run it again. So tap on your play button and bring your simulator back up. And again, now we've got that same prompt. Hello, human, I'm QuestionBot. Ask me a question. Okay, let's all type a question into our simulator. And again, we've got our on-screen keyboard. If you're not seeing yours, Command and the K key will bring up the on-screen keyboard for you. And then type in a question. It can be any sort of question. I'm going to type in, what is your favorite food? And you can also use the auto completion here if that's quicker for you than typing. What is your favorite food? Did a pretty good job of predicting my question, didn't it? All right, now we can see again our ask button is active since we've typed a question. So let's ask our question. And QuestionBot says, I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. Awesome. So we've got a response, but again, not super helpful, right? Um, it'd be better if QuestionBot had said pizza or hot dogs or beef stew, right? Something that would help me to kind of know what QuestionBot is thinking. But at least we're moving in the right direction now. We programmed in a little part of its brain, but we need more. Okay. And to do more, let's go back here to Xcode and let's go ahead and stop our simulator. And what we're going to do is we're going to build out this function. And to do that, since we're just working on this one part of the app, we're going to save ourselves some time so that we don't have to keep clicking on the play button up here to build and run our app every time. And the way we can kind of save that time is we can open up a playground where we can work on this function. And we haven't talked about this at all. We can actually work on code over in the playground and then copy and paste that over into an Xcode project, right? We're running Swift in the playground. We're running Swift here in this app. So that'll save us some time because then we won't have to wait for the simulator to build and run every time. We'll just be able to get that instant result in the playground. So let's go ahead and just move Xcode out of the way here. We're going to head back to Schoology and we're going to grab a playground. So let's move on to our next page in Schoology. And we will just grab that file. All right, and we'll actually skip over this next page here again for people who are gone and highlighted what we're doing so they can catch up. We are gonna build out our function. This is what we're gonna do next. We're gonna work on, as I said, just this one part of the app, building out the brain. We know some of the other parts of the app has been built for us. This is a really good strategy as people are working in teams to kind of, sometimes different people are specializing or working on only one part of the app and making sure that part apps and then combining everything into one big app. So a great way to kind of really focus on just one little piece of it. So we're going to move to the next page and grab the question answerer playground. So click next and then scroll down to the bottom of our page here. Go ahead and click on that linked file, which again is going to go off to your downloads folder. And so I'm going to go back over here to downloads. If you're in Safari, it's going to unzip that for you. If you are in Chrome, double click it. And then again, let's go ahead and move that. Let's move it into our projects folder just so we're keeping everything together and making it easy for us to find it. So before running that, let's go ahead and drag it over. So you can either grab that playground and drag it into documents. I'm going to make it easy on myself and open up another window, another Finder window, just by going to File and New Finder window up here. And within Documents, I'm going to open up my Xcode Projects folder and drag this over. That way, everything's going to stay in the same place. And actually, just so that we don't move anything down here with QuestionBot, make sure that we're just kind of ignoring this for the moment. We want to stay here in the playground. Okay. All right. Once you've got that in your Xcode projects folder, go ahead and double click it. We'll get this warning again. We're going to trust and open this. It's coming from our Schoology course. And that's going to bring up our familiar playground, right? And we're going to use the playground here again to help us to just focus on this one part of the app, building out the brains of our QuestionBot app or building out those responses and kind of making the logic model for how does QuestionBot know what to answer. And we won't be able to answer every question, right? That could take quite a long time, but we're going to get a sense of how do QuestionBots work and how do conditionals really help us to make that code more efficient, right? All right, so let's take a look at this here in your playground, and you should absolutely be working along in yours because we're going to copy and paste your code back to Xcode project file in the end. So you want to have some code to copy back. All right. So what we'll start out with here is kind of looking at the brain of the question bot being that function response to that we started looking at. We're seeing the same function here that we saw over in our project file where maybe we don't really know how to answer that question so far, right? A little bit more detail here. So this is phrased slightly different than what we were saying. Sorry, what was that? Very similar to, I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. So this is fine as well. If we start looking at what kind of questions can we ask, we can call the function down here on line 16 by typing out the name of that function, response to. It's going to pop up right with that question parameter, and we might type in, how are you? And what we'll see as a response, if we tap on the quick look over here on the right side, QuestionBot is going to respond back with, sorry, what was that? Because that's our return value right here, right? This string. And so we're kind of saving ourselves some time getting that instant response where we don't have to run and build the app every time. Okay, so we know so far that our code is not enough to answer this question, how are you? If we asked another question over here in line 17, by calling the function response to, we'll type in the parameter, that question. I said, how are you? Right? I'm just rephrasing the question, hoping that it's going to understand how I'm saying it different. And again, QuestionBot, if you tap on the quick look over on the right side, the result is going to be, sorry, what was that? So it's going to say exactly the same thing to us because it only has one string so far that it can return to us. So basically, no matter what question we ask, we're going to get the same exact phrase returned to us. And we can see that in line 18, or if we call the function again and we get prompted for the parameter, what's our question? and we type in, oh, never mind, because we're frustrated. If we look at quick look, it's again going to say, sorry, what was that? Because as this code is running, as this function is running, the only return value it has, the only string that is going to return back to us is, sorry, what was that? And it doesn't know anything else. All right. So how can we work on the brains here for QuestionBot? We can start giving it some additional words, right, or phrases. So if we move on to our next page here in your playgrounds, we'll be able to walk through a few examples here and then add to our own code. So in line 6, we have another parameter here, or excuse me, another situation that we're going to look at. We are, in this case, calling up this function. We know that the phrase that we're responding to, and again, we're kind of dealing with some code that's hidden behind the screen here, if you will, where we can't see exactly what it is. But we can actually use some of the code within Xcode where we're using code completion, right? Sometimes it is popping up things. There is a property that we can use in our dot notation, and that is our Swift programming. If that's our string here, and we typed the period, we're going to see autocomplete bring up for us all of the dot notation, all those other properties that start with a period. And one of those is has prefix, which means what does it start with? If you think about what prefixes and suffixes are in grammar, so prefix is the beginning part of a word, right? So the property of this string that we can tap into in Xcode by using the dot notation has prefix, and then putting in parentheses and then within quotation marks that string Swift means we're looking for, in this string on the left side, does it have the prefix Swift? If we look over here, yes. That starts, Swift programming definitely starts with the word Swift. So we see that Boolean value over here in the result sidebar saying that's true. It does. So this can help us to kind of move forward with making a decision based on this condition, right? If we look at our second example here, we've got a string. Again, this is kind of being given to us here in the playground. Swift programming, again, using that same dot notation in Xcode to look at the properties of this string. Dot has prefix. Does this string have the prefix programming? No, it doesn't. That's why we're getting the false value over here. We can see the word programming, so you might be tempted to say that's true. But again, if we're thinking about prefix, that means we're looking at the property of the beginning of the string. So programming is actually at the end of the string. That's why we're getting false back as our Boolean value. And again, we could use these conditions by checking the property of this string on the left side and seeing if it has this prefix or matches this part on the right side, right? So does it start with Swift? Yes, it does. That's true. Does it start with programming? No, it doesn't. So that makes it false, right? Let's do a little exercise here with this then. So let's look at our function down here, and let's add some additional code and test it out so that it will respond in different ways to those first words in our questions. And this is kind of how you go about building your responses for QuestionBot. Is you have to start somewhere, right? And as we saw with the PowerBot responses, they were kind of focused on maybe what are those most common questions that people are usually asking PowerBot to respond to. And that's where they started as far as what I was typing in. So we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to look at the return strings based on maybe the prefix or the beginning of the questions that are typed in. So our response that we have here is we've got a function called response to. Our parameter is we're going to pass in a question. We've got type annotation that tells us that we want to type in a string, right? We're going to return a value in the form of a string. And then within the body of our function, we start running that code and checking those conditions. So just as we learned about on Tuesday, we're going to start off with an if statement. And we're going to process that first. And based on that answer, we'll know if we keep moving forward or if we stop running the code if our condition is met, right? So what we're going to do is with our if statement here, if our question that we pass in has the prefix hello, then this is going to happen. We're going to return why hello there. Else, if this is not true, we're going to keep on moving through our code. Else, if the question that we pass in to our parameter of our function here, if that question has the prefix or starts with the word where in the string, then this is what is going to happen. We'll return the value to the north, and we'll see that string or that phrase get returned. If that's not true, if it doesn't start with where, then we move on to this next condition, else. So if neither of these first two are true, this becomes our default. Else, we're going to return the string that really depends. And now if we call our command down here, then we'll see whether or not our function knows how to respond and which of these to return. So if we started calling our function response to and we pass in a value, the question for this as our parameter, if we said hello there, if we look at our quick look, we can see what we're going to get returned to us is this phrase or string, why hello there. So we know that this first bit of code has run here. It checked to see if our question started with hello, and then it returned this string. And so we don't see these other two phrases, right? Over here, we just get why hello there because our code stopped. We met a condition, our Boolean value was true, and so we stopped our function at that point. All right, if we call the function again, response to, and we pass in our argument or our question, where should I go on holiday? Our function is going to start again. It's going to process this first piece of code. Does where should I go on holiday? Does that have the prefix hello? No, it doesn't. So it skips over this return value and it moves on to the next condition to check for. So does our question, where should I go on holiday, have the prefix or start with the word where? Yes, it does. So if we looked at our quick look over here, our result, we get that response to the north. And then we don't see this last value because our code stops again. Once we have that true Boolean value, it'll stop running. And just a third example, if we call our function again, response to, we pass in our question, what is the capital of France? We start processing our code. We start checking these conditions as our function runs. It says, does our question, what is the capital of France, have the prefix or start with hello? Nope. So we skip over this return statement. We check the next condition, else if, does our question, what is the capital of France, have the prefix, start with the word where? Nope. So we skip over this return value because that also is not true. And we move on to our default value else, and we check our condition. And in this case, we don't have a condition, right? Because these first two weren't true. So we're saying this is our last resort. If these aren't true, this is what we're going to do. So it returns that really depends. And if we check our quick look on our results sidebar, that's exactly what we get. All right, so the default value is kind of that last condition, and it will get to that if the first two conditions or however many conditions we have, If none of those are true, remember it just keeps moving down the line until it finds a true one and it stops with that. So in this case, it prints out this last response because our question started with the word what and we don't have a prefix that is what in any of our responses, right? Okay, to wrap up with then, the last thing that we're going to cover here is it's pointed out to us that in the second line here on line 20, when we passed in a question, where should I go on holiday? Then we did get the correct response there, right, for the prefix where. But if we change this to a capital W, then if we look over at our quick look, oh, sorry, if we look over, yeah, to our quick look, what we'll see there is now it took a couple seconds for it to change there. It says that really depends. So it doesn't say to the north anymore, even though our question did start with where. So we're expecting our question bot to respond to the north, right? But we'll find out that where with a capital W doesn't equal where with a capital W, or with a lowercase w doesn't equal where with a capital W or all capital letters. Okay. And we'll learn how to deal with that on Monday when we come back to this. All right. If you have any questions, go ahead and type those in the chat. Otherwise, we'll leave it here for today. And Monday, we'll come back and work through the rest of the playgrounds, which will give us the code that we need to make our app work. All right. Awesome job today. Thanks, everybody.